Hello, and welcome to this February 2025 edition of Monroeville at your service. I'm your municipal manager, Alex Graziani, joined in studio today by a very special guest, our own newly elected and recently sworn in State Senator Nick Pisciottano. Nick, welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Wonderful to be here.
Well, I'm really glad that you agreed to do this because it's so important for us in Monroeville to really get to know you. So I wanted to create a situation where the residents of the home get to meet you, learn a little bit about you, and then maybe just find out a little bit about what you think you'll be doing as a new state senator. So welcome. Mm-hmm. So a little bit about yourself. I've read your bio, so I was like looking at that. You're a public accountant. Mm-hmm. So you're a CPA.
Yeah.
And valedictorian of West Mifflin High School, which is a big deal. I don't know how many kids graduated there, but if there were more than 10, I would not have been valedictorian. So what got you into being a CPA? Was that something as a kid you were a numbers guy?
Yeah, so I grew up in West Mifflin. I graduated from West Mifflin Area High School. I still live there with my wife and my 3-year-old son. And after high school, I went to Washington Jefferson College, and my big thing was I wanted to be able to get a job when I graduated. I graduated from high school in 2008. The financial crisis was just starting to happen by the time I got through 4 years of college. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that you could come out of college and get a job in the field that you wanted. But there was one field, accounting, that was always hiring, and that was a good career prospect. And so I took a couple of those classes early in my university career, and I really liked it. And so I kind of just kept going with it. I graduated in 2012 from Washington Jefferson College, got hired by a global accounting and auditing firm, KPMG, and spent 8.5 years working as an auditor and a CPA before my election to the State House in 2020.
So did that require travel?
Oh yeah, I traveled all over the country. I went to India on work one time. Wow. So I worked for a lot of the biggest banks in the country, very large organizations doing audits of their financial systems and things like that. So it was, when you're coming out of college and you get a job where you get a good salary and you get to travel the country and meet new people and learn different things, it was challenging, but eye-opening, and it taught me a lot of skills that I even use today and as a member of the General Assembly in Harrisburg.
Yeah, I always think about what's your first job, and whether that's out of college or the job you had in high school, there's always something to get. So while I'm on that subject, what was your first job, like way back when?
In high school, I think my first job was working for the school district in the summer, cleaning the schools. Outside of that, I worked at American Eagle in the waterfront for a number of years, like after school, kind of part-time job. And as I said, after I was done with college, actually, my first job was I was a soccer referee for a number of years, all the way through my teenage years. And then in college, I refereed high school and collegiate games, because I had a flexible schedule with my college schedule being done early in the day. I could go referee. So that got me through college and things like that. Again, so taught me a lot of skills being a referee, I'm thinking to myself, that I still use in Harrisburg today.
When I witnessed with my kids growing up in those soccer matches, parents of 8-year-olds and middle school and 10-year-old soccer players can really be rough on refs. We used to have to get sat down and lectured to how to behave, and some of us didn't do very well with that, and needed to find other things to do while the kids were playing, because when we watched, sometimes we hollered at the guys with the referee uniforms on.
Yeah, I mean, even I like yelling at referees. It's part of the fun of watching a sport, right? But being the referee, especially as a teenager or someone in their early 20s, it's refereeing players that are at the same age or only slightly older, dealing with the players, dealing with the parents, dealing with the coaches. It's a crucible of pressure, right? And it teaches you how to kind of deal with those things, how to kind of let things go and move on with your life, which as an elected official is a very important skill. So I do miss it from time to time, but I just don't have the time right now to referee. So
have to have some thick skin.
Yeah.
And then also decisive, quick decisions, and then kind of move on to the next one.
Yep.
Excellent. You mentioned being married and having a son. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about your wife and your son.
Yeah, so my wife Molly and I were married in 2018. She actually grew up in Irwin, so not far down the road from Monroeville here. And then we had our son Nico in 2021. So
how did fatherhood change you?
Well, I had the unique experience of going through my first election campaign, a global pandemic, and shortly thereafter, my wife was pregnant. And so all of those changed me, and you could probably debate which influenced what. But coming out of the other side, and this is a thing that I take Harrisburg with me all the time, is I want my son to be able to have good opportunities when he grows up, right? I was fortunate enough to go to a good school, get a good job, stay in the region. A lot of my peers in my age group didn't do that. They either moved into the city or they moved to other parts of the country in search of a job or what be it. But we have a challenge here in Allegheny County of making sure that our next generation has the ability to go to a good school, get a good job, afford a starter home, and start to build their family here. It's not an uncommon story in our part of the world that multiple generations did that, but that feels like it's getting a little too tough now.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I think of my senior class, a lot of them are all over to the Four Winds. And, we're pretty proud of the fact that we have all the Steeler bars in so many of America's major cities. But the fact is, a lot of those are expats, former Western Pennsylvanians who would love to be back, but weren't able to stay and had to leave.
Yep.
And it's that economic thing. And so, yeah, what a blessing to be able to do. And I appreciated that because I think I read in your bio about a great, great, great grandpa who is buried not too far from where you grew up.
Yeah, so I think it's 4 or 5 greats. I always get confused. But basically, before the American Civil War, one branch of my family came over from Wales. And the gentleman who came over is actually buried in Trevosburg Cemetery, not far from where I currently live and part of my district that I represent. And so, for 150 plus years, my family's pretty much been in this area and not made it very far away, which is important. I think that to have those longstanding ties is a really cool thing that Western Pennsylvania has in a lot of places. But it's also a responsibility to make sure the next generation and the one after that and one after that have those same opportunities. And I think right now, we talk a lot about jobs, we talk about affordability of goods, we talk about housing. And those are major barriers to the next generation being able to stay here and succeed in the way that we would hope that they can.
Yeah, that blessing to be able to stay in the area is really important. So, you're in the public accounting world. What made you decide to run for office? Are there people in your family history that were public servants, or how did that story happen?
So in 2020, no one in my immediate family had ever been elected to office. Because we had lived in the communities for a long time and grew up with a lot of the same people, we were always involved in local politics. We knew our state legislators. At that time, it was Representative Bill Courts and Senator Brewster. We knew those folks. They knew us. You had your 1 or 2 interactions with them a year. You were involved. In 2020, Representative Bill Courts decided to retire. I was married, didn't have any children at that point. It was always something that interested me. And in January of 2020, I decided, why not? Give it a shot, right?
So you decide to run. You start in February to do a circulation of a petition. And then before you know it, we're moving the primary, and a lot's going on because of COVID. I mean, typically I think of the state representative having a district, though very large, almost small enough to go door to door and get people known. So how did that work?
So the state rep district represents about 60,000 people. So back then it was about 8 communities. And the deadline to file your petitions to be on the ballot to run for office that year was about a week before the shutdowns happened. We file, everything's good, I'm on the ballot, I'm running this campaign. A week later, everything closes. The schools start to close, there's all this uncertainty. And the hardest part about running a campaign, especially the first time, is getting out there to meet people. And I had to do that in an environment where you weren't allowed to go out, you weren't allowed to be around people, right? So it was a different kind of challenge. We did a lot of social media, a lot of stuff like that, because that was the only way to contact people. And our message was more around safety because of the pandemic rather than normal political talking points. And so I think I built a lot of goodwill in the community by addressing those urgent needs and talking about those anxieties that people had in that very uncertain situation. And we got through 2020, there were some up and downs, and then, I was able to win the election in November as well. And then I went to Harrisburg, and the first week in office was when the vaccine started to come out. And if you remember that, the State Department of Health was in charge of that, and they had all these criteria, and it was very confusing to people. So we were trying to navigate that right out of the gate too. And I just try and take away lessons from those kind of situations. You know, you're always going to make mistakes. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but how can we learn from that and do better next time? And it helped me understand my job as a representative, being able to, and the core focus, I think, of my job now and then was helping people with whatever their needs are. At that point, it was to try and get a vaccine so that they can go to work or keep their family safe or do those things. But trying to connect those dots between the government and the people it represents to make sure that you're able to help them with whatever services they need. Now, thankfully, we don't have to worry about the pandemic as much, but there are still services that people need access to, and we want to make sure that they're having the ability to get to those.
You're in Harrisburg, and it seemed to me pretty quickly you were able to establish yourself. I think it was in 2022, after you win your second term, you're sort of part of the Allegheny County delegation leadership. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a function of a number of things, but that's pretty awesome. I mean, for a one-term, first-term, second-term person to be able to have that recognition among your colleagues.
Yeah, and I benefit from a lot of good mentors and friends who were able to help me understand how to do the job and how to build relationships that you need to be successful in Harrisburg. One of those, a good friend of mine and a constituent, is Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis, who had held the delegation chair spot before me. He gets elected to be Lieutenant Governor. He's the youngest in the country, the first African-American Lieutenant Governor, like a history-making kind of person. And he and I are close friends, and so it was, I learned from his examples. He gave me advice. He taught me how to do things in Harrisburg. But it was also indicative of the fact that, my role as kind of the leader of all the Allegheny County House Democrats, all 16 of us, was really born out of the fact that the folks that are going to Harrisburg to represent Allegheny County are much younger than they used to be, right? Mm-hmm. There was a generational turnover where you had the delegation mostly comprised of 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds, and now you have a delegation that's mostly comprised of 30 and 40-year-olds. And that's just a natural way of things, but that turnover, that generational turnover, meant there were a lot of new folks, a lot of younger folks that were representing Allegheny County in different capacities. Representative Brandon Markosik, who represents Monroeville, is one of those folks. Yeah. First elected in 2018. He was just named majority chairman of the Housing Community Development Committee as a 33-year-old. Yeah. I mean, that's unheard of, right? But they're part of that generational change in Allegheny County on the state level and on the local and county levels as well was really borne out by the fact that I was able to be the chair that young and that new, because everybody was relatively new.
Do you see that in Harrisburg as well, or is that just more of a Western Pennsylvania, Allegheny County thing? Is in general a lot of newer state representatives, younger state representatives?
Yeah, I think in the state house in particular, a majority of the body has served less than 6 years.
Excellent. Wow.
There's 203 members, so at least half of those, probably almost 2/3, are newer and younger. And obviously, a 30-year-old with 2 kids and a wife has a different perspective on issues than someone that's older, or, has already raised their children and maybe has grandchildren. Not to say that their perspectives are any less valuable, but I think that the government works best when you have a varied
nice
number of perspectives. And so having younger folks who went through the financial crisis like I did, and understand kind of the challenges that had for people to buy homes or get jobs or raise their family, I think that's an important perspective to have. And so that generational turnover happens every so often. The members that come out of Philadelphia to go to Harrisburg, that kind of generational shift happened a couple years earlier. Okay. So it does happen on uneven patterns, but it's just the nature of things that older representatives eventually give way to younger folks, and that's an important part of the process.
You mentioned the Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis, and Representative Markosik. That's how I first got to meet you. Mm-hmm. Particularly, I really learned to admire the Lieutenant Governor. When we had our crisis last year with the announcement by Oxford to sell the convention center, having it being leased to another entity or close the convention center, it was the Lieutenant Governor, Senator Jay Costa, I can't say enough about. I'm sure you're using him as a mentor, I would imagine, because of his tenure. and Brandon, you all came together and really came alongside us at an important time. And you know, with the leadership of Mayor Grisak and Monroeville Council, we're able to keep the Monroeville Convention Center in Monroeville. What did you learn about Monroeville? Because you know, you weren't necessarily representing us at the time, but came a part alongside of us with your leadership position. What did you learn about us or see in us and the importance of keeping the convention center here?
Yeah, so I didn't represent Monroeville at that time, but as the leadership of the county delegation, you know, I was involved and worked with Representative Mark Kosick to make sure he had whatever he needed to turn that bad situation around. I had many conversations with Senator Brewster, Lieutenant Governor Davis, Mayor Grisak, everybody involved in that process. And I really do think, you know, as an elected official or politician, it's an occupational hazard that people want to find a reason to be upset with you, right? If your street's not plowed soon enough, if there's a pothole at the end of your road, whatever, that's part of the job. But the story about the Monroeville Convention Center is actually a great example of how elected officials can get together and actually take a negative and reverse it into a positive relatively quickly. Without the leadership of Sean Logan and Senator Costa and Lieutenant Governor and Senator Brewster and a lot of those folks involved in that conversation, we would not have been able to turn it around. And it would have been a huge negative for Monroeville and the surrounding area if we weren't able to fix that. But because those folks had good relationships with each other, they were all willing to get involved and spend some of their political capital and their time and their effort. They were able to find a positive outcome for that. And that's really what your elected officials should be doing, is they should be finding ways to fix issues, big and small, to make, you know, life better for the residents they represent.
I state your name.
I, Nick Pisciottano,
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
So last month, you get sworn in as our new state senator. What are you looking to do here in the next year? And then also think about, as we start to wrap things down, about how people can get in touch with you to let you know what is important to them. So what are you looking to do this year?
Yeah, so for 4 years as a state representative, I represented 6 communities, roughly. I now represent 37 communities. So, the first 6 months in office, I plan to be as present in every community as possible. I'll be attending, local council, local school board meetings to meet with all the officials, going out into community events, anything under the sun. I want to be out there in the community because I can't do my job unless I'm out there talking to regular folks, hearing about their concerns, and then taking those to Harrisburg to try and address them. We also will have our office in Monroeville and one Monroeville Center that will continue to operate every day, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. So anybody is welcome to call or come in there.
Do you have 3 or 2 district offices?
We have 2 district offices, so Monroeville is one of them, and McKeesport is another one.
Okay, great.
But we'll also be rolling out a model of satellite offices. So, for example, in Plumboro, we'll have a permanent satellite office in their library. We'll have a couple of those all over the district. We'll have weekly and monthly satellite offices in some communities too. So the idea is that no matter where you live in the 37 communities of my district, at least monthly, me or my folks will be in your community willing to serve you.
So we're towards the top. How far does it stretch down?
Yeah, so the district is sprawling, so it goes from Plum and Monroeville all the way down to Elizabeth Forward area, all the way down to the Washington County line, and then it juts out across the center of the county, so I go all the way over to like Castle Shannon, Baldwin, Whitehall area. So we have 37 communities along the Monongahela River, East Hills, South Hills, so it's a big area to cover. It's about 250,000 residents in Allegheny County, so it's 1/5 of Allegheny County roughly. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we want to make sure that everybody who lives in my district knows who I am and knows the services that my office can help them with whenever they need them. And so you can go to pasenatornick.com. That has all my office information, all our contact info. You can email me, you can call our office, and we'll get right back to you.
Yeah, and I like what your approach is, right? It's trying to learn the communities, learn the issues, and then be able to make that connection with you, which I know we've been very fortunate to have access to Brandon, to access to Senator Brewster, and now to you as our state senator, and people like Austin Davis as well. We don't want any of them to be strangers to our communities. We really want to have a presence in Harrisburg, so that when we're looking at liquid fuels and the assessments that go on to our road repairs and those kinds of things, we have plenty of PennDOT projects we think that need to be prioritized, and we'll be looking for your help there. So really excited about you willing to come to us and be on Monroeville at your service and take part in this. Any last things you want to say to our residents and to our constituents?
No, I mean, this is great. I plan to come back and do these every so
we gotta do
often,
that.
as long as we get good ratings on this one, I guess. But, to the residents of Monroeville, I would just say it's an honor to represent Monroeville, and I want to do everything I can to keep this community as vibrant and successful as it is. And that, if you have any concerns, big or small, that you call me in my office and we'll do everything we can to address them. So that's my job, is to serve my constituents, and I want to be able to do that. The hardest part of my job is when no one calls me and tells me they have a problem. I can't fix a problem I don't know about, so please reach out, big or small, and we'll do our best to fix it.
Well, Senator, it's been our honor to have you on as today's guest, and we're looking forward to 4 years of working closely together and getting great things done for our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
On the way next, an excerpt from our behind-the-scenes documentary-style video where some local youngsters put on a performance of Frozen. Plus, I'll have the Manager's Minute on legacy.